Here's something we'll do. People have been asking for this. Who you think are the best teams? Can you rank the teams? We've had an off season. We had free agency. We had the draft. Where did everything shake up? What I decided to do, and we're going to call it the Middlekauff Elite 8. It's my Elite 8, but it's not a true Elite 8 because I picked the top 4 teams from the NFC and the top 4 teams from the AFC. And so I picked 8 teams, but I think we'd all agree, because you don't need to be Bill Walsh to figure this out, the NFC is way better than the AFC. And I think it's fair to say that maybe my third AFC team would crack the top 8 if we did a true league, but I'm going to go Elite 8. I'm going to break it down by conference. So we'll call it the Middlekauff Elite 8, and we'll start in the AFC. And number 1 in the AFC, to me, is pretty easy. They won the Super Bowl. They have Patrick Mahomes. They returned 20 of 22 starters. They had a sweet running back in the draft. They had a sweet linebacker, Willie Gay Jr. in the draft. They have Andy Reid. They bring all their coaches back. They're really freaking good. I would not be shocked to see the Kansas City Chiefs win another Super Bowl. I think they're the heavy favorite for a reason going into this season. They're going to be really good. They've been really good for the last, basically since Andy Reid showed up. They've gone to a completely different level since they drafted Patrick Mahomes. I don't see why anything would stop. Now, the pushback, now granted, they went 11-5 last year, though Mahomes was banged up. Division's going to be good. The AFC West, I don't know who's going to be the second best team, but you could make a case for all 3 teams. And when the dust settles, wouldn't shock me if they get 2 and maybe 3 teams competing to make the playoffs. I mean, I think Drew Lock's going to be good, and the Broncos went 7-9 last year and started terribly. They had a really good draft, a good offseason. Chargers have talent, blue-chip talent everywhere. They came out of the draft with a stud quarterback and Kenneth Murray, and the Raiders were feisty last year. Now, they don't compete very well with the Chiefs, but that division's really good. I still like Kansas City against any team in the AFC in the playoffs, and then the Super Bowl, as you saw, they'd come back from 10 points. Number 2 is pretty easy, too. Now, I'm going to put a caveat on the Baltimore Ravens. Their roster's really good, and they might end up having a better record than Kansas City. I don't care. I look at them a little bit right now like the Houston Rockets in the NBA. I no longer judge you on the regular season. You'll win 12 to 14 games. Lamar will be running around, making a ton of plays. Wink Martindale will be dialing up defensive play calls, and you'll be kicking everyone's ass. Like, oh, the Ravens, 13-3, number 1 seed. Got to win a playoff game. Back-to-back years, hosted playoff games. You lost. You lost them both. And last year, the Titans kicked your ass. So I'm putting them at 2. They deserve to be at 2. I think they're going to be really good. Their roster is really, really talented. Harbaugh wins, but you got to do something. I'm just strictly going to judge them in January. That's the only thing I care. Now, they're a fun watch, and I think they'll win that division relatively easily. Depending on who that second team, if Roethlisberger's healthy, maybe they're a couple games behind and a playoff team. Who knows about the Browns, but it's just about to win in playoff games if you're the Ravens. Because everyone's like, oh, they crushed the draft. I mean, we always, the offseason, the media loves the Ravens. Eric DeCosta's friends with everyone in the media. We get it. Win a playoff game. Again, I like the Ravens, but number 2, pretty easily. 3, I think we have a new... I won't say heavyweight, but team to beat in the AFC East. And I still think, I'm not counting out the Patriots with Jared Stidham, though he's pretty big unknown. I love Belichick, greatest coach ever. But I think the Buffalo Bills win the AFC East this year, and they trade for Diggs. They have a good, I think Sean McDermott's one of the better young coaches that we don't really talk about that much. Maybe it's because he's bald. Maybe it's because he's not an offensive play caller. But his defense kicks people's ass. They add Zach Moss this offseason, the running back from Utah, who's a really good player. Their offense, if it can just get incrementally better, Tom Brady's, gone. I saw Jim Kelly said this week, and he's right. There's no excuse anymore. Tom Brady's out of the division. If the Bills do not win the NFC East, it would be a failure. Just that simple. As harsh as that sounds, it's time for Bills Mafia and the Bills to take a next step. That's why I have them at 3. During quarantine, watched that playoff game against the Houston Texans. They were working them. They were dominating that game. And then it kind of unraveled. Deshaun and DeAndre took off. But when they're on and the quarterback plays well, they are really, really good. Number 4, this is a tough one, but another guy like Sean McDermott that I just don't think we talk about that much is Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel is a really good coach. 2 years ago, it was a play-in game to get into the playoffs. Mariota was hurt, and they had to start Blaine Gabbert, and they lost. This year, they bench Mariota, bring in Tannehill, start kicking everyone's butt. A.J. Brown became a stud. Their defense is just really good. Derrick Henry dominated back. Didn't have to pay him. Franchised him. We'll see. Maybe he holds out. I don't know. I doubt it. I mean, too much money. Only Le'Veon Bell holds out. Franchise tag is just too much cash. I just think the Titans are good. And when you look at the division, you go, yeah, the Colts could be really good. Like Chris Ballard a lot. I think Frank Wright's solid. But the Phillip Rivers, I love Phillip Rivers. But the version we saw last year was kind of a shot fighter. He wasn't bad. He was awful. In certain games I remember watching against the Raiders, remember that Thursday night game? He couldn't even complete a pass at the end of the game. Somehow they got like a penalty, remember, on a 4th down. They got 8 plays. I don't think they gained a yard beside off penalties. Something's off. And there's a chance it's just over. There is a decent chance, 12 months from the start of the season, he's coaching the high school team. I know he says, we'll see, we'll go year by year, and there's just so much, weird stuff going on with the Texans. Now, Bill O'Brien wins. I think he's won that division 3 or 4 times the last 6 years. Like, he goes to the playoffs all the time. Everyone, I get Twitter hates him, but he wins a lot. Now, I think the division's better. Titans, now the Colts are solid. We'll see if he still wins it, but I would put the Titans probably getting rid of Hopkins. I gave the Titans that spot over the Houston Texans. Let's go to the NFC. Number 1's pretty easy. And I get they were a one-year wonder, right? In Kyle Shanahan's first 2 years, I got the 49ers at 1. They won, I think 2 years ago, they won 6 games. Remember, Jimmy Garoppolo came in at the end of the season, rattled off 5 straight. They had 1 win. And the year before, when Jimmy tore his ACL, they won 4. Ended up drafting number 2. Well, that draft pick changed their franchise in Nick Bosa. And they have a really good roster. Joe Staley retires, who's one of the stalwarts of this franchise over the last 2 decades. Been the starting left tackle on multiple Super Bowl teams. He's been the starting left tackle on, I think Harbaugh won 5 playoff games. They won 2 this year. He's been a starting left tackle for a team that's won 7 playoff games over the decade and played in multiple Super Bowls. So you'd say that's a massive loss. Somehow they upgraded. Trent Williams is now on their team. They add Javon Kinlaw to replace DeForest Buckner. They also kind of turned DeForest Buckner and his asset being able to trade back a spot to get Brandon Ayuk to go along with the young core of guys in George Kittle, in Deebo Samuel, in Fred Warner, in Bosa, in Jimmy Ward, who's turned into a really good player. They got a great veteran in Richard Sherman, who's still playing at a high level. They have arguably the most dynamic young coach in football. So I think the Niners are poised to just be a dominant team again. And they're the best of both worlds. They can score when they need to, and their defense is like a heavyweight fighter. They want to hit you in the mouth. Sometimes with offensive coaches, their defense can, not be quite, it takes on the personality of the team, and you become much more offensive-oriented. Look what happened with Coach Reed. Last year, their defense came on, they won the whole thing. Look at Sean Payton. When he's had really good teams, their defense has been good. You got to have a good defense when you're a good offensive play caller. If you give a good offensive play caller a good defense, they're going to win. Every time Andy or Sean Payton have had good defenses, they've kicked people's asses. Now, you're not going to win the Super Bowl every year, and the Niners could be better this year and not even make it back to the Super Bowl. But to me, based on the offseason, based on their core guys, based on what they added, even though they did lose some things, some of that's their own choosing, I'd put the Niners at 1. Number 2, I thought this was the second best team in the NFC last year, and they end up becoming the 3 seed, and they lost in the first round, but that was the Saints. And there was a portion during the season where I thought they were a little, more well-rounded than the Niners. And then the Niners played them and beat them by 2 points, but they were both the cream of the crop, and somehow Kirk Cousins beat them. I still don't know how that happened, but it happened. I think Saints are going to be really good. They add Emmanuel Sanders. They've been desperately looking for a second wide receiver for a long time. Emmanuel's pretty good last year. When he got traded to the 49ers, he was a big reason they went on that kind of second half run and were in the Super Bowl. And hell, if Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't throw it 5 feet too far, Niners might be champs, and Emmanuel Sanders be a hero for the Niners. But they add him. Their defense is solid. Their whole coaching staff's coming back. Drew Brees comes back. They got Kamara and Michael Thomas in the peak of their powers. They got a really good offensive line. Division kind of sucks. The Panthers aren't going to be any good. Who knows? Falcons are just always average. I like the Saints at 2. This is where it gets a little hard in the NFC. Because part of it's projecting. And I'm going to go with Philly here. Now, Philly had a million injuries last year. Their entire team was injured. But you saw at the end of the season, until he got a concussion in the playoff game, when Carson Wentz flips a switch, he might not be Mahomes, but he ain't far off. He can dominate. And they draft a first-round receiver. Alshon's coming back. Hopefully he's in a better mood. They should just... Miles Sanders now has a full year under. They'll adjust their offense a little bit. They got 2 really talented tight ends. They do lose Jason Peters, who's getting long in the tooth, but they're replacing him with a first-round left tackle. They have an excellent interior offensive line. They still have Fletcher Cox. They add Darius Slay. Doug Peterson has proven it in big games. He can win. I mean, up until last year, he won a playoff game, the previous year against the Bears on the road with Foles again. So I like the Eagles. I like their quarterback a lot. Now, if you wanted to push back, you'd go, John, he's always hurt. And yeah, he's got to stay healthy. But when he was healthy, which he was last year, played 16 games, that second half of the season when he kind of figured it out, and he's playing with Greg Ward Jr., he's playing with guys that look like me. It's like, who are these guys? Every dude's going down. Lane Johnson's out. This guy gets hurt. This guy gets hurt. It didn't matter. I think Philly, if Carson can stay healthy, has a chance to be really, really good. My 4th spot. I don't like this roster that you could argue, how are you going to put Seattle above Green Bay? Or hell, even Minnesota. Dallas, too much unknown with Dak, new coaching staff, and Corona. I can't put them at 4. The Rams, not quite good enough. I went Seattle. Now, I would probably just take on paper the Packers, but, Seattle lost to Green Bay last year. They were another team that had a million injuries. I'm betting on the culture. I'm betting on the coach, because I'll take Pete Carroll over LaFleur any day of the week. I'll take, at this point in time, like in 2020, I'm taking Russell Wilson over Aaron Rodgers. And I just think their culture, again, they were so decimated by injuries at the end of the season, they were a shell of themselves. But never forget, they were within an inch last year. An inch. A Dre Greenlaw incredible play at the goal line of winning the NFC West. And they were not as talented as the Niners. Now they pull more games out of their ass than any team probably in like sports history the last couple years. But they win every freaking year. Since Russell Wilson became the starter, they've missed the playoffs one time, and that was 3 years ago. And they went 9-7. All they do is win. And the division's going to be really tough this year. Arizona plays them well. The Rams play them well. Obviously, them and the Niners have fantastic battles. But you'll look up, and Seattle will be 10-6 or 11-5. And just of the offseason, I don't even love their offseason. They're not bringing Clowney back. I don't love their pass rush. We had a corner that got arrested for something that might have robbed his own stuff back. Who even knows what's going on? But you got Russell Wilson. DK Metcalf looks like a star. Tyler Lockett's a stud. Bobby Wagner's still around. And just that culture on defense. They might have guys that you haven't really heard of. Not many, like the LOB ain't walking through that door. But I saw them live last year. And every time they tackle someone, they tackle them violently. There's a culture there that Pete has. They always compete. You can make fun of them for being, kind of cheesy or whatever. Shit works because they're just really good. And you look up, and it's the second round of the playoffs, and there's the Seattle Seahawks every freaking time. And if depending on injuries, if they're playing at home, all of a sudden NFC Championship, there they are. So I would have the Niners, Saints, Philly, and Seattle as my 4 in the NFC. And in my AFC, the top 2 are easy, Chiefs and the Ravens. Then I'd go Bills and Titans. The Middlekauff, Elite 8. What's up, everybody? My name is John Middlekauff, and I host a show for Colin Cowherd called 3 and Out on his podcast network. You can subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast. I worked in the NFL as a scout for Andy Reid and Howie Roseman, and I've been talking about football for the last 7 years. If you like your football talk, raw and unfiltered, no BS, I'm your guy. Subscribe to 3 and Out right now.